This is Scott Mitchell from TSN. You listen to the Walkoff with Scott and Adam. Make sure you tune in.
Hello and welcome to the Walkoff. I'm Scott Belford, joined as always by Adam Mack. And look at us actually laying down a Friday episode and both of our mics working and everything going well.
Mic check. uh, if our audio isn't working, we're in trouble because we just recorded our hour and 45-minute review of Major League. So if we don't have audio for this, we didn't have it for that. And I don't want to re-record that, as much fun as it was.
Yes, absolutely agree. And that is one thing we're doing for our Patreon, which is going to actually be up and running now. If you're in our Discord, we've probably already put it out there to you. You can join our Discord by going to the show notes. There's going to be a free link there for you. We do offer, I think what are we doing? $4 a month?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So we're doing
$1 a week.
We're doing $4 a month. If you feel like supporting us in any way, it's obviously greatly appreciated. We're not putting anything behind a paywall other than our movie reviews.
Correct.
So we are offering a little extra incentive there for you to get the Patreon. Of course, if you're not into the movie reviews and you just would like to throw us $4 a month, we can accept that very much so anyways. So that's great.
Yes,
we are getting a merch page up and going too. So we're moving things ahead here slowly with the walk-off. And if we thank you so much for all the views and the subscriptions and all that sort of stuff. So we're trying to give a little bit back. And if you'd like to support that, that would be fantastic. You can follow us on Twitter at Walkoff Podcast, on the Instagram. Yes, I just called it the Instagram. I'm that old. It's like when your parents say the pot. So you can follow us on Instagram, the Walkoff Podcast, and on TikTok. So we are going to, it is actually Thursday here. We're pre-laying this intro down. We had the pleasure of chatting with Scotty Mitchell from TSN, Jay's Insider, yesterday. And we figured rather than release his episode today and then doing another episode on Friday, I mean, not enough's happening in baseball right now to get that much content. Maybe when the strike, or I should say the lockout's over, we can do that sort of craziness. But for now, we will throw to him. It was a great conversation. He actually sat down with us for almost an hour. We talk everything baseball and Blue Jays. So enjoy, Scotty Mitchell. So excited to be joined by today's guest, writer and broadcaster for TSN and Toronto Blue Jays Insider, Scott Mitchell. Welcome to the Walkoff, man. Thanks so much for taking the time.
I appreciate it. I'm not Joe Siddle, but it's the next best thing, maybe. I don't know.
Right? There you go. Well, Joe sat down. Look at you doing the standing desk thing.
I know. He's used to squatting. I got to stand up, man. So I was more of a pitcher as a kid,
So before we even get started on this, man, I know that for the last few years, every February, you kind of do the countdown of the Blue Jays top 50 prospects. And man, I love it. Like, it's just like such a great peek at the pipeline and the players coming up. So great stuff, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, I love it too. I mean, I'm a prospect junkie. This is kind of a labor of love. And, I'll give you a little insight. I'm one of the few actually writers and baseball media people that I've met that plays fantasy baseball, and I love super deep dynasty leagues. Like, we're talking 100 prospect rosters here. So it's interesting. And look, I think the fans kind of love that stuff, love getting into the nitty gritty and learning about these guys. And the people I talk to are everything. So it's not really my opinions on these players. It's a whole host of kind of sources and people coming together, and it's an interesting project for sure.
Well, it's been interesting even on our end of things. We've been lucky enough to have guys who have been generous with their times. We've talked to over 30 dudes in the Blue Jays organization, and it's kind of cool to see the interest when there is the content there. People are interested in these guys that are coming up through the pipeline and their experience and so on and so forth.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I looked through your channel. I saw you had Kyle Johnson on. I didn't listen to that one, but I'm curious. He looked really good out of pen late in the season last year. So I think even when that trade was made, I think everyone was kind of looking, potential reliever once they make that shift. So, that's an interesting thing. You can always look for those next Jordan Romanos. And I think that's the thing. It's, baseball is so interesting. And that's why I've learned a lot, doing that project over the last few years is, you never want to pigeonhole guys because baseball
Right?
players can change so quickly. One tweak, one swing, and now we're in this analytics era where they can be helped, in the off season
Yeah.
by things like that. And I've seen players show up at spring training looking completely different. So you kind of always got to couch it because you never want to say this guy is going to be this type of player because things can change so much, and especially in this data era. Teams are leaving no stone unturned when it comes to trying to figure out what these guys and what kind of role they can play.
Especially when you're talking bullpen pieces. I mean, if you
Oh,
can
absolutely.
pinpoint a strong suit or like something that just throws a hitter off, like a guy like Kirby Snead, or all of a sudden, like guys
Yeah.
you wouldn't normally profile as a big league guy, all of a sudden, yeah, there's just something they're doing right that fits into a bullpen or whatnot. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it has to do with philosophy too. I think, 20 years ago, there was a real type that, a lot of prospect people would not look at. And now you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
guys like Adam Simber and look relievers and,
Yeah.
different types of, one pitch guys that can, play a role. And I think, just being open to all that stuff, it was just the way roster construction has changed. It's allowed people to kind of open their minds and look at guys that, maybe aren't throwing, well, back in, 10, 20 years ago, it was 95 and now it's 98 with a slider.
Yeah.
But, there's many different ways to go about getting guys out. And, we've seen the whole trend across the game, man. Like, the Rays kind of started this and, we'll see where it goes. But I know the Blue Jays have got some interesting guys that, maybe you don't hear of and aren't even on that prospects list, but there's some relievers in there like every org's got. So.
Well,
It's
you
funny.
nailed it too. I got such a kick out of listening to Alec Manoah on an interview last year where he referred to himself as big bodied. And I'm like, only a guy who's come up a pipeline like he has uses the term to describe himself as big bodied. Like,
Yeah. Big bodied fastball guy with a slider. Yeah. He knows, he's read the scouting report. The funny thing
that's
about
right.
Alec is he's a very intelligent individual and he doesn't take a lot of things personally. So I would bet that he's read every single scouting report. He knows, he talks about it in every
Yeah.
interview. He's like, what's the next step? Okay, change up development. It's like reading his prospect report. So
Yeah.
they know, they hear the same stuff from the org too.
For sure, of course they do. So baseball news has been basically at a standstill the last couple months, other than a lot of Barry Bonds talk and speculation about what happens after the lockout. But negotiations are starting to heat up here as we kind of approach this self-imposed Feb 28th deadline on Monday that the MLB and MLB put into place to whether they play a full season. And I know a lot of analysts and baseball people we've talked to feel like missing regular season games would do incredible damage to the game and its fan base. Are you getting a sense that the owners and the players are feeling the urgency, or is the urgency only being felt by the fans?
Uh, yeah, I don't get the sense that there's much urgency right now. I think that's starting maybe this week, and money creates urgency. And when you
Mm-hmm.
see those spring training games, the Blue Jays are supposed to open up on the 26th. It's a drop in the bucket for a big league team, but it's still money. So that's the first pressure point, and that's why they're meeting this week. And the next pressure point will be regular season games. But I think even talking to people back in November, December, everyone kind of expected to be in this position. We've seen this with baseball. We've seen it's a slow burn process. We've seen there's, PR tweets and things like
Yeah.
that have to go on. And hopefully we're through the meat of that. And hopefully, these next 3 days produce some tangible kind of movement. But, I think for fans, it's tough. I don't think, missing games is the worst thing. I think the PR leading up to it is horrible for the sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrible for everyone involved. I think, fans need to realize that, yeah, you can look at it. It's a billionaires versus millionaires fight. That's the term that everyone loves to throw around. This is for the future of the sport. And, the PA lost a lot of ground in 2016. And, they do need to dig their heels in a little bit, in my opinion, and make sure they get what they can out of this deal. And I think that's the most important thing. And if you end up starting April 15th and losing 15 games out of a season that's way too long anyways, I think baseball will rebound.
Yeah.
And to add to
So,
that, there's a lot of baseball people in front office that think a 140 game season is ideal
yeah.
in terms of sports science, recovery, pitching, things like that. Convince the owners to lop off 20 games. That's a different story.
Well, as
Well,
long
I'll
as you
be
tack
honest.
them
If
on
they're
in the playoffs, then they're going to be
That's
just
what I was
fine
just
with
going to say.
that.
If they actually wind up expanding the playoffs to 14 or 16 teams, like, why do we need to watch 162 games? But
Yeah, and you may
so
watch a better 140 with players healthier and a
exactly.
few more rest days.
So if these two sides actually wind up moving mountains and actually strike a deal by Monday, and all I can think is the free agent frenzy for the week leading up to spring training is going to be insane. Like, it's going to make a very busy November look like a snooze fest. And I'm starting to think that
Yeah.
some of these teams, like the Blue Jays, that did some of the heavy lifting pre-lockout, might be at a real advantage. Do you think that's reasonable to think? And do you feel like there may be teams that wind up missing out on filling some needs because they got lost in the craziness of the shuffle?
Absolutely. I'll the second one first. I think every offseason there's teams that miss out on filling needs. I think that's, not every team comes out of the offseason with their A or B plan kind of, set in stone and on their roster. So I think the first one, absolutely. I think, it was absolutely paramount for the Blue Jays to replace Robbie Ray with Gosman atop the rotation. That takes all of the anxiety away for, I think, the front office, and it should for Blue Jays fans. You can look at the roster and pick out the holes pretty easily. But yeah, that was big. And I think when you look at what kind of some of the contenders did, they knew they needed to get out ahead of some things. And, it's an interesting market. And, I think when you look at Trevor Story, you look at Chris Bryant, those are the dominoes that are going to fall pretty quickly. And I think those ones are the ones that interest the Jays. I think Carlos Correa is obviously, if I predict something right now, I'd say Correa and Freeman are both Yankees when this is all said and done, unfortunately for Blue Jays fans. But, it's going to be very interesting, and it's going to be a frenzy, and it's going to be interesting to see how the dollars play out and whether players are going to take a little bit less just again at camps, if teams are going to play hardball, how the trade market kind of works in there. I think the trade market will be pretty quiet. I think there's a lot of dominoes that need to fall first, and then maybe you'll see a couple deals at the end of the spring. But I think a lot of teams are going to wait until the deadline, and I think you could also see teams kind of get out ahead of the deadline. Maybe Matt Chapman goes in June instead of late July, something like that. I think it's going to have a kind of a domino effect on teams not being able to do everything kind of as slowly and as calculatedly as they would like to.
That's really interesting, and I hadn't really thought of that. Sorry, Adam, I'll let you jump in a second here.
Yeah.
I just hadn't really thought about how this will impact the trade deadline. And yeah, you're right. Like, it's going to make it insane. Like, and I like that prediction of the early movement, especially if there's only that week to get stuff done, right? Like, maybe it's just makes more sense to just go with what you got and see where you need to go after a month or two. Yeah.
I absolutely think a lot of teams are going to do that. And, obviously we're talking Jays, and, depending on how the market goes, I mean, Trevor Story is that guy right now where I want to see where his market is, because he could very well be Marcus Semien. He could say, yeah, I'll take your 1 year, 20 million. I'll go play second or third base and, hit in the middle of that lineup like Marcus did. Not bad. It worked out well, right? So, but he's going to have multi-year deals, but, maybe not to the number that he wants. So I think when you kind of look at what teams are going to do, I think, Jordan Groshans is going to be set up at AAA. You've got Biggio, Espinal. You need some sort of depth piece, but do you need to make the impact addition for April, May, June? I don't think you do. I think, maybe Jordan Groshans comes out with the AAA baseballs a little juiced up and has a really good April and May. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there going, okay, this guy needs a crack before we, try to go out and trade somebody. So it's interesting. Like I know front offices right now are trying to figure out, a lot of different strategies coming out of this and trying to figure out a landscape that they don't really know what it's going to be. And everybody who's watching this is probably going to say, what do you mean? These teams are all talking to each other. Nobody's really listened to that. They're pretty wary of the fines. I know that.
Yeah.
So there's some talks going on.
So I just wanted to get your thoughts on the shortstop market in general, then obviously with guys like Correa, Story. As far as a game of musical chairs goes and who's going to be the first domino to fall, do you see there being more shortstops available or more teams in need of a shortstop?
Look, I think every team is looking for upgrades at shortstop. When you talk last winter about potentially upgrading Bo Bichette, that tells you how important that position is and how teams look at that spot. And Bo made great strides in the second half of the season. Is Bo ever going to be an elite defensive shortstop? I don't think so. But he proved he can stay there in the short term. He needs to continue to make those. So when you look at the shortstop market, I mean, like I think Trevor Story is a positional switch candidate in order to kind of rebuild his value. I think Carlos Correa, obviously teams kind of look at him different. I think he's a terrific player. I think he's a perfect fit for the Yankees, but they got two shortstop prospects coming up in Peraza and Volpe. So I think teams are just being a little more cautious of the big the big deals when you can find that controllable talent. So yeah, I think there's more teams right now that need upgrades that don't, but I just think there's a lot of teams that feel 100 9-figure contract upgrades, it may be a little rich because normally your best prospects, your best athletes in your system are shortstops, and you kind of want to believe in those.
Okay, so follow-up question there then. Do you think whenever opening day may or may not take place, is there any chance
it will
Carlos
take place? Let's not go
All
there,
right, let's not get too dark. Um, whenever it happens, whether it's on time or not, let's put it that way.
Better.
Do we think there's any chance Carlos Correa is unsigned on opening day?
That's a very interesting question because you've seen guys like Kimbrel a couple of years ago kind of wait if their market wasn't there, and this is such a unique circumstance that you really don't know. And just knowing how free agency works, knowing the game, knowing how these front offices are really just so adhered to their numbers, I would expect them to come out and lowball just about every free agent possible to see if they're anxious to get into a camp, anxious to get a deal. So that's probably going to slow things down. And it's really interesting. I think some of these top guys, and we all know Scott Boris's reputation for being a guy who could take some of his top free agents and wait it out a little bit. Absolutely, I think there's a chance, a non-zero chance. Do I think that's likely? No, because I think once the CBA is done and once the financial landscape is clear for the next term, 3 to 5 years, whatever it is, I think owners are going to be ready to spend.
Of course. So this was really interesting last week. This was a piece of news that caught my eye, just that Juan Soto over the beginning of the offseason turned down the Phillies $350 million 13-year deal,
Yeah,
which
same deal
number one, an
TSN.
impressive offer, right? Like we're all aware the luxury tax is going to go up. How high it goes up, we don't know. So my question for you is, if you had to make a prediction as to who in baseball will be the first $500 million signed player, who do you think it is?
I'm in the spot here. Put it this way, I'll say I don't think it's anybody currently in the league.
Okay.
I don't think Soto. I don't think Vladdy. I don't think they're going to get there. I think it'll be the next wave. I think that's where the inflation takes it. So,
Aroldis Martinez. No.
sure, if you want to believe in that. I mean, that's not outlandish. He could be a great hitter. If you want to look at like Julio Rodriguez in Seattle, I would assume that they'll get him locked up well before that, though.
Wander Franco.
So I think the question is, probably should be reframed, which of these young superstars decides to forego that early 200 million, 150 million to get to the 500. So That's the interesting question. I think all these players right now, the Bichettes, the Sotos, the Vladdies, I think 354. I think it's in that boat. 500's might be a half decade off.
So Sports Illustrated, speaking of Vladdy, just came out yesterday with an article saying that he has yet to be talked to about contract extension. Is this noteworthy or is this nothing?
I don't know that I would believe that, first of all.
Okay.
I don't know where that report came from, so I'm not going to shoot down what the writer said. But there's been conversations with both those guys' agents about the framework of a deal. Whether it's not got to Vladdy level, it's at agent level. And, I think those extensions happen in February and March. I don't think they're going to happen this year just because of all the other stuff going on that we've talked about. But the Blue Jays, look, I mean, they want to lock these guys up, and the time to do it was last year for the club. And now the leverage is back in the players' hands because they both had terrific years, and now they're 3 seasons away. So it's an interesting thing. The Blue Jays have talked to both about these long-term extensions, and I think the question to ask with that is, are they interested? I've had many conversations with Bo, and Bo is a big bet on yourself guy who believes in himself. And I could see him wanting to, max it out, go through arbitration. And, this is one of the big things with the CBA right now. What is that going to look like? So,
right.
There's a lot of questions in the air that, those type of extensions right now are things for fans to talk about because there's so much other business to go. And you have to revisit those extensions when you get the next CBA.
So I know you wrote a couple of blurbs about a couple of prospects that, despite not being the most highly touted, maybe some dark horses to contribute sooner than later. Spencer Horwitz was a guy that you brought up, and he's a friend of the show. He's actually come on and chatted with us a couple weeks ago.
Nice. Spencer's a good guy.
Yeah, he is. And you know what? Like, his tools fit in with what the Jays could use right now, right? Lefty bat, broke the high A Northwest League's hit streak record last year, working every day at becoming positionally more versatile, as anyone who's playing first base in the Blue Jays system should be. What do you like about Horwitz, and can you see him playing on this team in 2022 in some capacity?
2022 is a stretch. I think, look, this guy needs to prove it at every level. If he goes and rakes, he's absolutely going to be in the conversation, but it needs to be he needs to really put up some monster numbers. And look, he's going to the right place. I mean, the left-handed porch there, Rowdy Tellez took advantage of that at Northeast Dental or whatever they're calling it these days. I think it's still called that. I haven't tracked it, but look, this guy's ability to get on base is everything. And when you look at a Spencer Horwitz type player, and I'll throw another guy in there, Zach Cook, who plays a little bit of a different position, second and a really good center field. So that obviously ups his value, but they're very Tampa Bay Rays-ish type players. You kind of find, a home to hide them defensively, and you just allow them to get on base. And, if you want to comp for Spencer Horwitz, it's maybe a Yandy Diaz type, a guy who can get on base, but really never has that power to become any sort of impact player. But that's a really valuable player on a good team. So, it's interesting. And he's just the type of player that has to prove it every year at every level. He's got to go out in New Hampshire and, OBP close to 400, and then he'll get a cup of coffee in Buffalo, and we'll see. But when you look at the hit tool, you look at what he did against Arizona Fall League pitching last year, and I was down there. It's legit.
He hit 375 or something like that. Like,
he did it all year. He did it all year at against every level of pitching, at every challenge that was presented to him, and that's what you want to see with these guys. And when it's a 24th round pick, that's gravy, and credit to him.
So this is a question that I'm actually pretty excited to ask you, because you're one of the guys I can think of who might actually be able to kind of set the record straight here. I know Keith Law of The Athletic just came out and ranked the Blue Jays as the 5th best minor league system in baseball. Sports Illustrated the week before had come out and ranked them 19th. In your opinion, where does the Blue Jays farm system rank?
It's interesting. I will first couch it with the fact that I don't do every system comprehensively, I can't give you an accurate, I'll call it scientific answer. If I did that, I would have a better answer. When I look at, just the talent around baseball and look at what's in the system, I think they're middle of the pack. Top 10 seems high. 10 to 20, though, completely fair. I think when you look at, the high-end talent, I think Keith Law really loves Moreno, really loves Relvis, and I don't know if does he have other guys in his top 100? He must, if they're top 5.
Is Nate Pearson still a prospect, or is he graduated out of that now? Because I know there's kind of a gray area on some people do consider him a prospect.
So I can set the record straight on that. Okay. MLB pipeline goes by days on the roster, days of service time. So he's not a prospect to them. If you go by the 50 inning threshold, he'll be on Baseball Americas. He'll be on, some of those other ones. He's on mine. I have my own whatevers. If a guy's at 51 innings and I think he's still a prospect and he's worth writing about, he'll be on my list. But So look, it's not the worst system. It's not as good as it was, but when you graduate 3 or 4 elite players to the big leagues, that's going to happen. So I think there's a lot of kind of mid-tier guys that could take a jump this year. And, I think if you're looking at this system as a top 10 system, you're already really liking some of those breakout guys, probably more than others.
Okay, well, let's delve into that a little bit then. I'd love to hear some names. If you were to predict, let's say, one Alek Manoah contribution from a call-up this year, and obviously they don't need to that's setting the bar way too high. I'll take that. I'll completely take that back, reel that back in.
Hey, look, Alek Manoah, let's touch on it. I know. Because he was 6th or 7th on my list last year. And obviously at the end of spring training, I'm like,
He should have been higher.
Yeah, nobody's seen this guy for a while. Obviously, I don't know, what's going on here. And then you start to see, you saw the aggressive assignment. I thought AA was going to be aggressive last year. You see him in AAA, and you're like, okay, there's some stuff going on here. And obviously, just with the shutdown, so hard to see that coming. If you would have seen him on a mound, we probably all would have seen it. So that's interesting. I would not say there's a Manoah. You know what? I should probably just pull up my list. That would probably help.
More what I'm looking for is someone who calls up and contributes. Maybe someone that you wouldn't expect necessarily to be on this team in 2022, but gets their opportunity and runs with it.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'll go with my boy from last year, Yasver Zulueta. He held serve at number 15 for me after he tore his ACL. You guys follow me on Twitter. I was talking a lot about him last spring. They felt good enough to throw him onto the major league side with 0 experience coming out of Cuba. And he looked pretty good. He was erratic in those. I think he made 2 appearances. And then first pro game, covers first base, tears his ACL. So first of all, it's a knee, totally recovered, ready to go. So I'm essentially going to try to reboot that hype this year because I think this guy, just based on the reports, 97, 98 with the fastball, secondaries are at least good enough to get by right now. If he comes out, he'll probably start at low A just to keep him in Dunedin to be able to monitor him, which is one of the benefits for the club with the new kind of structure. You just send guys to a couple starts in low A because you're playing right at the facility. So if he goes out and shoves, he's going to quickly be in AA at the age of 24. And if he can hold the velocity deep into starts and start to show some secondary stuff as the year progresses, he could be a guy. I don't know that he's going to come up and be in the rotation, but his 40-man year is next year. So they've got to make a decision by November on him. So if he goes out and shoves based on his age, based on, how they kind of pushed him last year, he could be a guy.
Is there a starter in this system that you could see, let's just give a complete scenario here for you. The Jays wind up not going out and bolstering their rotation. They decide to try and fill that 5th spot from within. Ross Stripling takes a hold of it. There's an injury. Somebody's coming up to fill it. Nate Pearson's currently, they want to keep him in AAA. Who can you see filling in and possibly even doing all right?
Yeah,
is there a guy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you had him on your podcast. I mean, Zach Logue is probably the guy that's, starter 7 or 8 right now. When you look at the depth chart, I think you got to go, Stripling Pearson right now. I think that's going to change by the time they get into camp. I think a fifth starter of some significance is on the shopping list, whether that's a trade or, a Zach Greinke type for 1 year, $12 million or whatever you want to look at there. So I think that's going to change. But as of right now, it's definitely Stripling, Pearson, who's going to have innings limit stuff. He's not going to be a starter all year. They could absolutely stretch him out, and he will be stretched out coming in. But at some point, that's going to shift likely into a multi-inning kind of relief role, whether that's in the second half. And there's many ways you can go about it, but they want to try to develop him as a starter, and you shouldn't give up yet. But
yeah,
this team is going to be in contention in August and September, and Nate Pearson's going to be playing a role. He's not going to be, developing as a starter in AAA then. So that's an interesting wrinkle. And then when you look at the depth chart, it's Tom Hatch, Anthony Kay, Zach Loeb, Bowden Francis. And those are the 4 names. They're all in the 40-man. Kay has really
Loeb
struggled.
number 1, do you think? Just a lefty or?
Well, you know what? That's an interesting question because it's going to matter. It's going to be matchups. If you're facing the Tampa Bay Rays, you might want if it's a spot start like that, and it's going to depend on how they perform too. So
yeah, that's
that's going to be essentially the rotation in AAA. So if they go out and pretty much whoever's performing well on May 7th or whatever it is when you need that that extra starter, that's how it's going to go. But that's an interesting group of depth. Is it enough at this point as a contender? Probably not.
How did Bowden Francis look in AAA? What did you hear on him? I know he
Good.
came over in that Trevor Richards movie.
Yeah, the big thing with him, and it was similar with Zach Logue, he added the cutter a little bit, and they got him on a velocity program, bumped him up a little bit, and then Francis added a slider, and that really kind of became his best secondary weapon, and he was tinkering with that with Milwaukee, but the Jays kind of found a little bit of another level. So he's kind of that sneaky guy that could be better than you expect. You kind of, again, we go back to, you don't really want to pigeonhole these guys. And, everyone says, back end starter, it's so boring. There's a lot of back end starters that come up as back end starters. And once you start pitching against big leaguers, you start to figure some things out. And I wrote it in one of my prospect blurbs. I'll never forget Ross Atkins, at one of the trade deadlines. It was in Kansas City. So it was the year they traded Stroman. And he said, look, at some point we're going to have the Mike Clevenger type pop up. And obviously that was an example from his Cleveland days. And, I haven't forgotten that. When you look at some of these guys that don't have that big prospect pedigree and they show up in the big leagues and all of a sudden start getting guys out.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So, back end starter types right now, but, they're both interesting names with some interesting stuff.
Yeah, that is interesting. It'll be cool to see how that all plays out, even with just who they bring in as that 5th guy. I know you kind of alluded to they're probably shopping for something, so can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote last week maybe Tyler Mahle. They really really liked him. I could see a Greinke type. Maybe they look at a Drew Smiley, Johnny Cueto.
Yeah,
not going to move the needle really, but I think there's options out there.
Yeah, they've been sniffing around that Reds organization for about a year and a half now, eh?
The whole league has, man. Something's going to give there too. Something's going to give. It could be any of those guys. I heard Mahle was very close. That one wouldn't shock me.
Interesting. Okay.
Speaking of Reds before we move on.
Sure.
I mean, Joey Votto. Any chance he gets thrown in on a trade there? Comes and plays little
lefty bat
DH for us.
I mean, I think everyone would love to see that. I mean, it's amazing that I wish Votto would have tried to get out of there years ago to show up on some playoff teams and try to win a World Series. But
yeah,
I mean, look, I can throw the Freddie Freeman rumors in there too. I think those are agents working hard on that one. I mean, it's really hard to see a DH first base fit on this team. But you know what? With
Vladdy's
some dominoes,
not moving back to third, eh?
No, trust me. I mean, I don't know why you would ever consider that at this point. And, even people talking about it last spring, I was like, this is your first baseman, but it's his skill set there, and just let the bat do the thing. And you know what, the good teams in this league, the LA Dodgers, the Tampa Bay Rays, the St. Louis Cardinals, they play excellent defense.
It just seems so greedy to take him and try and ask for more than what he's already giving it. The fact that we would even consider tampering with perfection seems so selfish, from a fan's perspective.
Yeah, look, I don't think anyone's really considering it. That's the obvious kind of connection when you hear the Freeman thing. But look, are there ways that you could, make a big splash and add a Matt Olson, Freeman and rotate? Sure, there are ways, but is it ideal? I think the question, for every GM is just, does it make you a better team? And unless Freddie Freeman's going to take a 1-year deal just for $25 million just to play with the Jays, I can't see that.
Honestly, dude, thank you so much. This has been such a great chat, and if you've got enough time here, we've got a pile of listener questions. What it is, so if we don't
Yeah.
get to these quick, we'll get roasted.
My thing says 33 minutes. I promised you guys 60.
Yeah,
All good.
that's
All
great.
good.
That's great. All right, Adam, I'll let you take over here. I know you've got a bunch of them.
All right, so first one comes in from our Discord. Yoshi wants to know, how good do you think Seiya Suzuki will be in the MLB?
From everything I've heard, very good. I would say that, you can look at a typical middle order kind of 25, 30 home run bat. I think some of the transitions kind of give you pause. I really like Susugo coming over a couple of years ago. The Blue Jays were in on him, and he didn't really work out. But that was a really interesting situation because part-time player with the Rays, never really found his footing. I would expect him to have a pretty decent year with regular at bats in Pittsburgh. So, this guy's on another level, legit corner outfielder. I'd say, 25 home runs, a 120 WRC plus and 3 WAR. I think that's a very good starting corner outfielder.
Awesome. Okay, next one comes from SCTI. We kind of touched on this earlier. What prospects do you see making a jump in the rankings this year, which we already touched on, but the follow-up is which ones are sell high or sell now players who we should be looking to get rid of in a deal, like Austin Martin was used last year with part of that Brewers trade.
Interesting. Look, a lot of people would probably, maybe put Arelvis in that boat. If you believe that the strikeout rate is going to get a little out of control, if the approach isn't, as tight as it needs to be in the upper minors, maybe you're selling high. Do I believe that? I wouldn't trade him, but we're talking about for top of the rotation guys or a very, very good position player here. So, down the list,
just to throw a name out.
Yeah, there you go. Would I make that trade from Ramirez? No, but maybe.
Would you be upset by it?
I wouldn't personally be, because Jose Ramirez is one of the best players in the game.
Yeah.
No matter what prospect you're talking about, you're hoping they become that. Yeah. And people like prospect hugging, and it makes sense. And it makes sense in the world of, when you look at the financial aspects of it. But if you want the Blue Jays to win a World Series this year or next year, you absolutely want that trade to happen. So yeah. It's depends on how you look at it. Future value wise, you're probably losing that one, but it's interesting. There's so many ways you can look at it. Like flags fly forever. Chicago Cubs got one. There's probably a lot of people in that city that were disappointed they didn't get 3, because I thought they would, but that's baseball for you. So going down the list a little bit, I could probably pick out a couple more names. Breakout guy, Esteban Machado, the shortstop, tore his hammy last year, first at bat, first plate appearance. That was disappointing for the org. He's a guy that, could be kind of one of these, more complete guys. I think he's one to look at. Just off the top of my head, the group of college pitchers that they've drafted over the last couple of years: Chad Dallas, Trent Palmer, Hayden Younger. I'm missing one. I wouldn't be surprised to see a breakout of that kind of cohort, and they're around the 30s on my top 50 list. So that would be, I think, the group that I would look at. I think, you look at potential tweaks, you look at them just kind of getting a full season. I think you could have a breakout there. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of sell high prospects. I think you'd probably look at Kevin Smith coming off his year, but then he kind of scuffled in his, tiny sample size at the big league level. So yeah, that's probably the news.
All right. One question for me, just now that we're talking about kind of the lower, less sexy names on pitching prospects. Where does Joey Murray fit into your excitement level for this year? I know we've had him on the show a couple times now. Obviously led the organization strikeouts, I think 2019, and then had kind of an injury-plagued season last year. Didn't really get to do much.
Kind of 2021 Zach Logue, if you will. Kind of projected as a guy who's probably going to be with the team, and then had injuries all year.
Yeah. Interesting case, because I wrote about him last spring. He was really impressive, and obviously with him it's the spin rates. So So that's the wrinkle that you kind of have to think about right now. So he's had a little bit of an elbow sprain, had a couple setbacks, couldn't get back on the mound. You talk to some people that did see him on the mound. Unfortunately, the sticky stuff I think may have been a little bit of a thing with the the high spin rate. So I think there's some tweaks. Staying healthy is kind of the first and foremost thing. But if he doesn't come back with the spin rate, the velocity isn't elite. It's still 89, 90.
Right.
So right now, I mean, he went from somewhere in the late teens to the mid 30s on my list. It's kind of just wait and see. You got to see him on a mound. You got to see what the stuff looks like. So other than that, I mean, if he comes back looking exactly like he did in the 2020 spring and 2019, put him in that group of potential guys that could help the big league roster. I don't think he's a traditional starter. I think he's more of a 2, 3, 4 inning guy. Use him in advantageous situations in terms of what you can get out of him. I don't think he's a turn the lineup over 3 times type of guy. So we'll see.
Do you think there's enough curiosity in him from across the league just based on that high spin rate that he was coming up with? Is he like a Rule 5 kind of candidate to get picked up?
If he was healthy, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really hard to say. I think when you look at what teams like to look at, he would be exactly it. Not a lot of guys coming off elbow injuries that didn't pitch in games, get taken. So, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, next one comes from Mark in Discord. Says, I think personally there's a shot that they let Bo leave in free agency, especially if Elvis grows into what we're all hoping. So I guess what are your thoughts on, are the Jays going to prioritize a Vlad or a Bo, or how does that all shake out?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because obviously the positional value, you would prioritize a shortstop or even a second baseman over a first baseman, but Vlad is generational. So he's the priority. But I don't know that, I want to use the word priority because I think it's this, they want to keep these guys together. If I could see a player walking, it would definitely be Bo out of the two. And I kind of just touched on that earlier. It's just his attitude and his, confidence in himself that he may say, no, I don't think, the money that you're putting on the table is what I'm going to be worth. So it would have to do with that. Or Elvis is going to be a
third baseman. Okay. Any shortstops we have right now are going to be third baseman, right? Jordan Grosjean's third baseman. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a different game. Can you bring them up and play, shifts and kind of just deal with it if they hit well enough?
Yeah.
You could.
Fair enough.
But as we've seen with Bo, the position, it's just the bar is very high for defense, and Bo is a better shortstop than both those.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the shift, Scott? Can you see them do you think baseball would be better if they banned it?
I don't know about better. I've gone back and forth on it over the years. I think, the game should be played the way, it was intended. And I think, players being in their position is the way the game was intended at the time. But also, I think it's completely fair. If a guy never hits it to one side, you move somebody. So, and if a guy can't make that adjustment, then his numbers are going to suffer. So, I'm on the side of just leave it alone and let the sport as a whole adjust to it. And if the players like Justin Smoke who keep smashing it into a shift are the ones that suffer, I think that's just how the sport goes. So I wouldn't want to put too many kind of structured rules in place. And I saw some of the stuff at the minor league level last year with you had to have 1 foot on the dirt, you had to do some things. I don't love it. And we've seen the extra inning rules. I just don't love any gimmicks. Just if we figured out a different way to, kind of play defense in baseball, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
The hitters need to be able to hit the other way, and that solves everything, right?
Adjust your approach. It's a very simple equation when you're being shifted.
Well, it might take a couple years for that pendulum to swing the other way, but I think you're absolutely right there. I think that's the simplest.
What's you guys like the shift? Throw that back at you. Yeah.
I
It's tough.
feel very similar to you. I honestly don't think that it should be banned. I think that if, a team can come up with a way to, like I constantly think of the Joey Gallo picture of the shift with literally every single player on the other side, the right side of second base. And it's just
Yeah.
like at some point, and I know how hard hitting is in baseball, but at some point, like, come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And look, if they did say, you have to stay at your positions, I think I would forget about it 6 months later.
Yeah, me too. Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
like some of those things I don't have strong opinions on. I think, take the three batter rule out, take the stupid extra innings rule out. I'd probably live with just seeing guys at their positions again and not think about it. But
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, I think for me the most frustrating thing about the shift is not the shift itself. It's just the inability to hit, like to hit the other way, and to just, whether it's lay down a bunt down the third base line, or whatever the case may be. It's just frustrating to see guys so stubbornly just trying to swing at 8 fielders and hoping that it works out. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the way baseball's gone. These guys have some of these groove swings that they're geared to hit the ball out of the ballpark with runners on base, and that's about it.
All right. Two last questions here we'll get to. This one comes from Rayanne. Actually, baseball related. Did you see the dunk contest? Weak sauce, she says. We need the biggest names in the sport going out there. The Michael Jordans, the Vince Carters. We need LeBron James. And further, I'm worried that the MLB Home Run Derby is going in that direction too.
Oh, interesting. So first of all, I didn't see the dunk competition, but I'm usually a dunk competition guy. Unfortunately, it was Saturday night, which was Valentine's dinner night for me. So no, again, priorities here. But I love the dunk competition. Funny thing, so I was sitting in a Clearwater Beach bar in 2020, watching about 3 weeks before the pandemic, watching the dunk competition with Keegan Matheson of MLB and Gregor Chisholm of the Star. And unfortunately, that was when the news broke that Tony Fernandez had died. So when I think of, the dunk competition, I'm never going to forget that one, because it was,
a bummer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was just, it was an odd night to have, something like that break, of course. So go back to the home run derby. I love the home run derby. I think the home run derby is great. Like the changes they made with the timer, I love it.
Oh, big, huge.
This is the best version of the home run derby we've ever had. I get maybe her concern. I know we did have like Shohei Ohtani was in there, Perez. Like we had a lot of big names in the home run derby still. Let's not kid ourselves.
She was saying that she wants more big names in the home run derby, or was that the dunk competition thing?
Well, more in the dunk competition, but she was worried that the home run derby is heading that direction, and I think that probably stems from like guys like Vladdy who are opting out of it because they don't want to mess with their swing in the middle of the season and stuff like this. So are you concerned that that's gonna ripple through the whole league
and more prevalent?
I don't think it's a concern. I think you're going to see guys like Vladdy and Shohei. They're going to do it once, maybe twice. These guys can't do it every year. Teams frown upon it. They're not going to say no, but it's a long year. It's just, I think Vladdy made the right decision based on, where he was at. And I think that's disappointing, but I think just fans need to take that into context. I think you'll get the big guys, maybe not when they're at their peak, kind of like Vladdy. I actually think Vladdy will do it again. I'll put that on the record.
Okay, I like that.
But I think you'll get them once or twice, and then they realize like, hey, I'm tired.
This is exhausting.
Yeah.
It was an exhausting round.
I was in Cleveland for that one, and Vladdy was even a bigger boy at that time.
Oh yeah.
Just watching him come off, I was like, man. And people don't get it. Like go to the batting cage, take 100 swings against the fastball machine, and see how your rib cage feels the next day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and he hit like 91 bombs or something like that when he did it. Like, he's gonna feel it.
It was an endurance home run derby. It was amazing. I loved it.
All right, last one here comes from Daniel. Says, what changes should the MLB prioritize when it comes to capturing the younger audience?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think obviously, I mean, I'm 39 years old, so I'm more of a purist than probably people a little bit younger than me, but I'm also of the opinion that baseball is pretty dry and pretty slow right now. So I think, pace of play is something that, continuously has to be addressed. I just don't think, we live in this smartphone Twitter world where people just aren't into sitting around for 3.5 hours watching a game. Even no matter how good the game is. I mean, you look at movies and you see a 2.5 hour movie these days and you're like, nope.
Yeah.
So, I think pace of play. Other than that, I think the big thing that would really, really improve things in terms of, how this sport is marketed, how this sport is attractive to younger fans is just somehow getting these players to speak their minds more, allowing them to, be themselves. And I don't know how you do that because, baseball is a day-to-day sport. It tends to bring, the personalities that are very, very day-to-day focused on their work. And, there's not a lot of, snippy quotes and NFL stuff going on or NBA stuff going on. And I unfortunately think, that, that's what people like these days. They like the soap opera aspect of it, and they like the, the personalities and things like that. And, when I say personalities, I mean good, bad, whatever, interesting. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, but I don't know how you do that. And that's the tough question. I think, when you just look at, what these players do and say, I think, if, some of the coverage was a little bit more exciting, I think that would draw in fans. It's hard. It's a slow moving sport that's about strategy. And that's not what this, world loves these days. They love, drama and suspensions and, lots of hits and dunks. And
well, it's an interesting Rubik's Cube to solve, if you will. I know Adam always brings this up, that when it comes to just watching a game from front to back, baseball's probably the most boring. But if you're just going to take the highlights, baseball's highlights are just a gem to watch. So how do you find that happy medium between 4.5 hour games and Blue Jays in 30?
Yeah, look, I think that's the thing. You gotta cut through some of the long games and find a way to shorten them, and have more excitement. And you can look at the strikeouts too, more balls in play. I think there's definitely something to that. Although I don't know, like I'm fine with seeing a 12 strikeout game. Like I enjoy that. But again, like people that are hardcore baseball fans are not the people that you need to kind of talk to about
exactly
these issues. So it's a really tough debate. And I think just with the way of the world, with the everyone just needs everything like this now. And I think that's what you have to focus on. And then, hopefully you just find some entertaining characters and allow them to be themselves. A guy like Julio Rodriguez, I mean, I've seen this guy in the fall league and he talks around the cage, and I'm hoping he talks to media and, he isn't saying anything controversial, but you just need to have some personalities. And, I think that'll draw people in.
Awesome. Honestly, Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. I know we've been bugging you for a couple weeks, but we appreciate you making the time, man. Thank you.
No problem. Is that it? I still got 9 minutes on my clock here. So.
I gotta leave. I gotta go pick up my kid from school now. So I've got to cut this short. I know. I'm throwing her under the bus. But
well, we can do part 2 sometime. So that's all good. Enjoyed it, boys.
I look forward to it, my man. Thank you so much.
All right, cool.